Hello, my name is Joshua Slatko, and I'm a contributing editor for MedEd News, the pharmaceutical marketing magazine. Welcome to MedEd Views, our podcast series, in which we'll be chatting with some of our industry's best and brightest. Today's guest is an industry legend and longtime friend of MedEd News, Jay Carter of CG Life. A career of more than 40 years, including 35 years at Abelson Taylor, Jay has seen and done it all in healthcare advertising and promotion, including terms as chairperson of both the Coalition for Healthcare Communication and the Medical Advertising Hall of Fame. And we at MedEd News named him as our Industry Person of the Year at the Manny Awards in April 2022. We're going to begin with a very important question, something I've been meaning to ask Jay for nearly 20 years, and that is your name really Jay, or is that just a diminutive for something else?
This is interesting. My wife and I invited a couple out to dinner. There's the local Ruth's Chris does monthly wine dinners. And she sends me a text after they've said they're coming and goes, "So is this Jay and not Rhonda?" "Yes." "Is your name really Jay or is it something else?" And so here's the answer. My legal name is Albert Julius,
Okay.
okay, which isn't the friendliest name,
No, it is not.
right? And I am the sixth Albert in a row, okay? So my dad, whose name is Albert, was Albert, wisely decided that they just shorten it, and it was originally going to be AJ. But my dad just didn't like the way that sounded. I don't think he liked AJ Foyt, the race car driver. So it's just Jay. And I only know Jay in my head. I know Albert too, but it generally sounds like this. Albert, Albert,
So
because I was in trouble.
Albert is the name for when your parents were angry,
Yes, yes.
and Jay is for
Especially my
everything
dad.
else.
Jay for everything else.
All
Jay
right.
for and always has been that way. So
Now
yes,
that
sir.
that's been now that that's been squared away,
Established finally.
your career in pharma and MedEd News's career in pharma began basically at the same time, or very similar to the same time. Both been
Yeah.
knocking around in this for about 40 years. So I'm curious, what's the same? What's the
Okay.
same as it was in 1982?
Okay. A lot of the tech guys will explode at this answer, but promotion's still the same. It's about getting eyeballs. It's about getting engagement. And it's about moving people along a pathway towards a sale. And in 1984, in order to do that, you financially had to focus on physicians and also legally had to focus on physicians
Right.
because it was 92, 93 when Seldane got the first approval for DTC. And it cost a lot of money, but even then we could track where a physician was, we could track the mail that hit them, the sales calls that hit them, and create a model for how well you were driving ROI. So it's not like ROI came about with the internet. ROI was still there. It just was more expensive. Now, two beautiful things happen. One is the internet makes everything a heck of a lot less expensive. And then the second thing is we have the opportunity to promote to patients. And DTC to me is now low ROI driven because we can find patients, even very rare disease patients we can find. And so, DTP is mostly where the money's being spent today. And that's whether it's the clinicians who treat or the many patients who are affected by diseases today where brands can still make a difference, right? I mean, something like 96% of all the prescriptions in the United States are now generic, but the drug industry charges high prices for areas where they can deliver better outcomes worthy of the price. And that's mostly in oncology and in rare disease. The only real primary care category still is diabetes. And that's because the patients are just so not good at being adherent and compliant either to medication or to diet, myself included. Although my HbA1c, by the way, is 6.8, so I will brag about that. Um, I won't tell you how many meds I take to achieve that,
No need.
but and so the same that. The second thing, nobody spends $1 million with somebody who they don't trust. And so the agency game is still about trust. It's still about relationships. And that's why I still have a job, because there's a lot of people out there who know me, who trust me, who know that I'll do my very best for the success of their brand. Not necessarily somebody's personal success, but certainly the success of the brand. And so another thing that's the same from 1984 until 2025 is my North Star is patient outcomes. Because, I went to pharmacy school and I always felt like I had a responsibility. And that's not, I haven't had a pharmacy license since I got divorced 30 years ago and didn't take the exam for or the credits to get relicensed because the application didn't come to me. I haven't filled a prescription in 40 years, but I have a very, very strong affinity for just what's doing right for the patient. And I think that the people that don't do that can be in serious trouble. And I think that at the end of the day, that's why the industry still is insanely profitable.
Right.
You know, I just do. So the big things that have changed, DTP and getting an ROI at a much lower price, and getting results at a much lower price. The same, we're still helping patients out and we're still doing promotion to do that. And it's still about working with somebody you trust.
Right. A bit of a wild hypothetical. There surely has been noise both in and outside of government about banning DTC again, as it was for the first 15 years of your career. Let's grab that hypothetical. What happens to pharma? What happens to pharma agencies and folks like you who've been working at them for 40 years? How does it change the playing field?
Wrong question. The right question is what happens to patients? All
I
right.
revised my question. What happens
Right.
to
It's
patients?
like we have the opportunity to communicate opportunities for rare disease to a bunch of patients who are absolutely isolated, and you're going to take that away and tell me it's better for their health.
Right.
All right. And it's, the Congressional Budget Office estimated that if they shut down DTC, it wouldn't lower prices because pharma prices based on maximizing revenue. And that's how everybody else prices too. To go out and price a new Audi, it's not the cost of the components, it's the value that the buyer perceives.
Irrespective of how it's promoted.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, you know what? I understand that direct to consumer isn't popular with a lot of people out there, and I can respect that. I know it's very unpopular with a lot of progressives in our government, and I can live with that too. But now we get into all the different arguments for why this should not be curtailed. And, it's not like Capitol Hill hasn't put their eyes on us before. So first, there is this thing called the First Amendment, which I happen to cherish just as much as everybody else. And we have a right to speak truth to consumers. We need to do it responsibly. And the pharmaceutical industry, by and large, is pretty responsible. Now,
Right.
Senator Sanders, if you're listening, you might disagree. And I'd be happy to debate that anytime you want. But truth is that by and large, we're pretty responsible.
And policy shouldn't be set by the bad actors.
Well, I think that you address the bad actors in a completely compliant and legal fashion.
Right.
And I haven't checked lately, but I think Martin Shkreli is still behind bars.
I certainly hope so.
So, so what's going on here, I think, is a desire to limit the prices of pharmaceuticals in the marketplace that so many consumers ask for, and I can respect that. Remember, once again, 96% of it is generic.
Right.
Remember also that the marketplace has really ground a lot of margin out of generics. And one of my two big fears is that something bad's going to happen because the quality on the generic side is not high enough. And we don't have enough regular federal oversight of the generics that get manufactured. And not so long ago, the Guillain-Barré virus that they use for bladder cancer went in short supply because one of the plants just couldn't manufacture in a safe fashion anymore. And price skyrocketed and everybody went nuts. But it was like that was the fault of not keeping quality up.
Right.
And you need oversight for that. There's nothing wrong with that. Uh, and it could easily happen again. So generics probably should cost a little bit more than they do, but chains and PBMs have ground those prices down to what people are actually willing to swallow in terms of margin. And unfortunately, sometimes the thing that gets cut in order to get that margin is maintenance of the manufacturing.
And
So
safety.
safety is always an issue, and I worry about it not a lot. I take generic blood pressure meds, I take generic asthma meds.
You
But
said that was one of your two great fears, and I would be a terrible journalist if I didn't ask you, what's the other one?
the other one is that you can't make money selling a new antibiotic anymore, and yet resistance continues to grow. And I'm afraid we're going to get a super bug that's bacterial and have another pandemic. And we've had ours for the generation, right?
Really don't need to go through that again.
Yeah, 1918, 2020. The next one's 2100. My grandchildren, I hope, will do well, right? But I'm absolutely afraid that because you can't make money, I've seen two good antibiotics die because they just couldn't get money behind them because you couldn't sell enough to break even.
Right.
So, and that's a little scary.
Getting back to the promotional side of things, the one subject that none of us seem to be able to avoid in pharma and pharma marketing is artificial intelligence. It's
Sure.
sprayed all over everything, every publication, and everyone's dipping their toes in or dipping their entire body in. So I guess I'm curious what your vision of the future looks like when it comes to the use of AI in medical advertising and promotion.
Three main points. The first main point is that AI is already an incredibly useful tool. I won't call it an indispensable tool, but it's a useful tool. I use AI every day. Everybody uses AI every day because Gemini is now the first thing that evaluates your queries on Google, right? I'll get to that in a second because there's an issue there. But I hear enormous promotion and enormous attempts to differentiate organizations based upon their use of AI, and I'm a little skeptical, mostly because the typical AI application that we're confronted with promotionally is I'm a proprietary organization. I have proprietary data, some of which belongs to me, some of it might not belong to me. Everybody who's been a client of a pharmaceutical agency who's telling you that they've got an AI used your data to go into their private data lake in order to give you an instant analysis and try and relate what happened in the past to what will happen in the future. And my argument is fairly simple. I don't care how big that data lake is, it ain't the same as a broader market look. And so I'm always skeptical of the utility of what most organizations are calling their proprietary AI database. I'm not going to talk about anybody's specifically because that would be unprofessional. Um, Second, just accuracy, right? If your North Star is patient outcomes and you use AI to prepare materials for utility in serving patients, first thing I do is always put my eyes on it, make sure I don't see a mistake. And 3 times out of 5, I see a mistake. It's not big, but it's a mistake. And part of it's just how you ask the questions, right? So before I use materials derived from AI for even like a customer conversation with a physician, I've got a PharmD intern who looks up every fact, not using AI, and validates everything clinically to be sure it's true. Because telling the truth is essential in our business. So that's two. And then three, so Josh, what is the reduction in click-through rates since Gemini has happened? Any idea?
Oh, I couldn't even guess, but I know it's less for me personally.
So it's 20 to 60%.
Wow, well that's substantial.
Right. So, all right. So you're preparing SEO in order to get click through on your website, but Google's algorithm that we don't understand very well doesn't even give you a chance, right? And so the thing that I'm telling everybody that'll listen is even if it's trial and error, which is how we figured out the algorithm last time, you got to be very careful and make sure that what you're putting out as SEO for your websites actually generates traffic, right? And that's not easy. And there are some fairly simple guidances. The most important one is that what we did for SEO is probably what's driving Gemini today, right? But if you're measuring click-throughs as an output, you're not doing very well. So you got to figure out what are you achieving? And for me, it's always engagement, right? You don't you don't assume that your judgment delivers a good decision on creative anymore. You judge it by engagement. And we can measure very quickly whether we get an engagement or not. We can predict what we think our engagement will be. And so for good or for evil, I think probably ultimately for good, Gemini and Chat GPT are gonna give us the insights for the websites we want to go to with a lot less list making. But we got to change our perspective on what good click through looks like
Right.
because you're just not getting as much. So those are the three things. I guess the last thing, clients are expecting potentially more more cost savings in the development of content because of AI than may well be achievable because of the mistakes that happen, because content is so critical to driving insights that drive good patient outcomes, that I'm afraid somebody's going to sell a content engine that isn't backed up well enough, and some patient's going to get hurt. And I'm not aware of that happening yet, but I don't want to be the one associated with that. And so when my organization, and this is not a commercial, when my organization set out to decide about AI, we said, one, we're going to train everybody so you know what you're doing. Two, we're going to look at the ethical ramifications and make sure that we respect them. So we have guardrails regarding ethos. And then three, we're going to figure out ways to make content better, not necessarily more cost effective. And you get some obvious, cost reductions, because Chat GPTs does just fine, and so does Adobe at manipulating art for a comp, right?
Mhm.
So costs are down. If you're a freelance artist out there, business is drying up for a reason, and you're well aware of it. But that doesn't affect the patient's outcomes.
You said earlier you were talking about the relationship between a pharma brand and agencies, that those are founded on trust. And one of the
Mhm.
reasons your career has been so long is because you've developed relationships of trust with folks on the pharma side. And it sounds like perhaps some organizations are trying to use AI as a way to bypass the building of trust almost, but it sounds like you don't trust it.
Here's what I'll tell you. I have friends who I worked with in the past who are now very senior in other organizations, and we talk. And I know that these content expectations are being delivered, especially to the very large organizations, right? If you're doing an agency consolidation and you want to shake it up a little bit, you tell them, look, we're going to reduce in the next 5 years, we expect you to reduce content costs by 50%. And we think AI can do that. And privately, some of them are saying, I don't know if I can or not. I'm going to show them what my plan is, and I'm going to be responsible, and I'm going to show them, more importantly, my guardrails. If a client came to me and said, I want 50% reduction in 5 years, I'm going to say, well, let's start by agreeing on the guardrails. All right. Let's just start with that because maybe we spend less on brains coming up with content generation. We put a lot more on the backside saying brains evaluating the content to make sure it's true and good for people. You'll get there, it'll happen, and costs will come down. And I'm not opposed to using technology to reduce costs. I mean, you know, in 1984, you may have never even seen them, the old mechanical boards, and you would buy type from a type house and lay it down. Well, the Mac killed all that. I'm okay with technology making things easier and more cost effective. I just don't want content to suffer from it.
What happens to human craft as AI takes over pieces of the content development process?
Well, if it's agentic and not monitored, then it's probably a guardrail issue. But okay, you've heard the old story that if you get 10,000 monkeys, one of them's going to type out
Yes.
Holy Grit. It don't work like that, right? Now you can analyze all the scripture and come up with stuff that sounds like it, but it doesn't have the sacredness. And you can show them so many different pieces of artwork that's all well recognized, but they're not going to kick out a Madonna, you know? It's not going to happen. I think that creativity is still a human quality. I think that how you spin it off is the issue, right? And how quickly you edit it, you know. I've seen somebody speak into their AI interface to change the cut of a jaw, and it just happens,
Right.
as opposed to sending it off to an airbrusher.
So it becomes a tool for enhancing creativity rather than replacing it.
Exactly. And that's one of the core tenets that CG Life uses. It's about making the work better. It's not about making it cheaper.
Right.
It'll cut costs, and I'm sure it has, but that's not the reason.
Another popular subject, both in pharma and out of it, are the tariffs that
Yeah.
the president administration is perhaps and perhaps not about to enforce on imports from a variety of countries, including many who manufacture pharmaceuticals that we use.
Yeah.
Um, Setting aside the broader arguments over tariffs, how do you see that playing out in our little corner of the world, the pharma corner?
So remember I told you I was nervous about the generic supply?
Right,
I haven't looked lately, but it's hot, it's large. An awful lot of generics come in from outside the US, and and they can't afford to take a 20% increase without breaking the system. It could unknowingly raise the cost of care dramatically when it shouldn't. Now, what the administration wants is they want more reliance domestically on manufacturing. I can respect that, especially for something like pharmaceuticals, which are pretty important to be safe and effective, right?
right,
And so, nobody's making a big deal about it, but GSK and Pfizer and Eli Lilly and Novo actually did this years ago, put an awful lot of manufacturing capability inside the United States. I note that just today, Biogen has agreed that they're going to build 2 billion more manufacturing capability inside the United States. Um, all that is designed to say, look, let us police ourselves. We understand what you, the administration, want, and we're going to make an effort to meet your needs. This is the art of the deal, right? This is the art of the deal. And our administration is focusing on the deal, and they send the right signals about what they want. And folks are listening by and large. Now, it takes a lot of years to build up. This administration will be gone before all the moves that are happening today come to fruition, but I think they understand that. I think they understand that. So, but I I'm not staying up nights worried about whether my avocados come from California, Mexico, or Peru.
fair enough.
And I like guacamole, you
Who
know?
doesn't?
I think an AI would test that and say, well, if you don't like guacamole, you're not human. So
Probably not, or there's
there
something
you go.
wrong with you.
Exactly.
Sticking with the government policy angle of things, our good friend Bobby Kennedy has been loud and proud lately. You know that I'm already working on a piece about wearables, health wearables, and
Yeah.
thank you again for participating in that. What do you feel like his impact has been on the business so far, and what do you expect from him going forward
I
in
think
government?
there's been a lot of agita. I got to tell you that
Certainly has.
I'm in favor of an administration approach to increase the utility. It's funny you said wearables, and I itched because I've got a wearable. Um, so there's 2 points, and they're in my write up to you. But one, what do we strategically want to achieve? Because the way it was written is, every American will use wearables, and I would argue that that's not fiscally sound because most of the healthcare and most of the monitoring falls among a relatively small portion of our population who are all of Medicare age. And Medicare is under Health and Human Services too. So, Mr. Kennedy, if you can help monitor blood sugar better or monitor ECG better, I am all for it. And if you can figure out ways to make it more affordable, I am all for that. And if you want to promote it, I'm all for that. But I would love to see your RFP first to make sure that it's strategic. And not that I think that the administration lacks strategy, because I don't think that. I think it's extremely strategic. But, I'd like to understand the strategy, right? But that's good. Vaccines trouble me deeply. It's like I really, really want the CDC to figure out what this coming year's flu vaccine looks like because it changes every year in order to optimize efficacy. And I really, really, really don't want COVID to have another outbreak because we didn't manage that output well. And there is such a there's such a kerfuffle that I'm not sure really what impact they have on vaccine formulation, but it's scary, right? It's scary from a public health standpoint. Now, in general, whenever Secretary Kennedy is talking about better wellness, I think that it's a sincere effort and I'm supportive. When it's about attacking an industry because you think that they're greedy, I'm skeptical.
Right. The drug portion of total healthcare cost remains, what is it, about 10%?
Something like that. I honestly haven't looked lately, but that's statistic. I'd be surprised if it's five, and I'd be surprised if it's 15.
Right. So you're still talking about a very small fraction of the overall cost, and a much better regulated and controlled part of it than the actual service side of things.
Yeah. As long as he's regulating it.
Hmm.
I'm okay with regulation. That's the reason why everybody's willing to accept that what we say is truthful. I'm for regulation.
What's next? What's
What's the
next in
next
pharma
big
promotion?
thing?
Everyone's always asking that question. What's next now?
Everybody asks that question. There's a lot of crosswinds right now. And honestly, I'm not sure I've got a good answer for you. But here's what I can tell you, okay? Because I have a relatively short time. I promised myself that I was not going to be working in the pharmaceutical industry or in pharmaceutical advertising past my 70th birthday. So
Hmm.
on March 14th, 2028,
That's it.
I will not be here. All right. Um, and so for me, it's about the most important part of the deal that I made to come out of retirement and work for CG Life was I was tired of just being the BD guy and I wanted an opportunity to market. And so as I deal with people, I sell that because I deeply want to work on a couple of brands that are good for human beings. And I was very close on one where the drug failed. It died in clinical trials. And I died a little bit when it did because it was a very good drug in my mind. So, in my limited future of roughly 30 months, I want to work on two or three really good drugs that are
Right.
really good. And I guarantee you that they'll be good for people because I will work unceasingly to do that, you know? And I'll surf along with the rest of us. I'll surf along. I think that in 30 months that nobody will still have licked AI. All right, I'm willing to make that prediction for you.
Right. So we've talked a little about how the industry hasn't changed and how it has. How have you changed in the last
Uh,
40 years? What do you still recognize from back then, and what's different about you?
well, I spent my 30th birthday drinking shots of Malort in a Chicago
My
bar. I don't,
lord. Oh.
yeah,
Those
don't
who know,
recommend that for
those who
anything,
know
right?
know. Those who don't
Yeah,
probably shouldn't.
yeah. I was a single guy without a family, living in downtown Chicago on the 21st floor, and thought that I was king of the world. And since then, I have six children. I have eight grandchildren. Uh, I live next to a body of water that sucks your problems from you. I am married to the perfect partner. I have three dogs that are enormously joyful for me. The youngest just turned 1 year today. Happy birthday, Cha Cha.
Happy birthday, Cha Cha.
Indeed. But I guess the biggest change happened when I left Abelson Taylor because with it, I left that need to control, and I left a selling mentality to embrace a marketing mentality. And I guess the thing that didn't change in that time period is I take care of my friends, and my friends take care of me. And my job today is effectively to spend time with my friends and see if I can help them. You know,
May we all be
that's not a hard
fortunate
job.
enough, right? May we all be fortunate enough to end up with a job like that.
All you have to do is grind yourself to nothing for 35 years. And you too could do that, right?
Hmm.
I mean, I'm much happier today. I'm much, much happier today. So life is good. Life is very good.
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
The only thing that I think is relevant, and privately you might decide you want to cut, I've only worked for non-network shops.
Right.
And yet I have so many friends that are in the networks because it's, I don't know, 50% of all their revenue.
Hmm.
Um, Shout out to Robin Shapiro, who's leaving TBWA. You're a superstar. We'll be having cocktails soon in Chicago, and I look forward to hearing what the next step is for you. But during my short retirement, the Medical Advertising Hall of Fame asked me to do an analysis of 2015 to 2019 in our industry. And so I went and I looked at an accumulation of where the revenue went. And from 2015 to 2019, the industry grew at a compound interest rate of about, I think, 7%. Okay.
Hmm.
But where the money went was really interesting because networks grew a couple of points. Privately held companies, independents, went up a couple of points. And PE grew 38%. 38%. And that is interesting to me and a key reason why I chose CG Life, because we're PE backed. Okay. And I know a lot of bad things are said about PE.
Sure.
All right. Today, at least organizations by mine, we're designed to grow and we are purpose built to grow. And we're a combination of different entities put together in order to grow. But in order to grow, we put ridiculously talented people together. I just did a pitch with folks of such a caliber that a network agency couldn't afford to put that whole group on one drug and make money on it. I'm not telling you not to worry about the downside of PE, because there is some, but an upside, especially for a client who's looking for an agency, is you can buy phenomenal talent today. And if that's too promotional, I don't care if you cut it, Josh.
It's not too promotional. The
Um,
that 38% number, is that real organic growth, or is it just a function of the fact that PEs are buying or starting are
Probably a
buying
combination.
combination
Probably
of the
a
two?
combination, right? Because if it bumped as different organizations sold pieces. So I think Click took their first PE infusion in 2018 or something like that, and that suddenly Click was PE backed, and that changed it. But our CFO and I had a conversation about PE, and he said, "Look, PE is definitely about investors pooling their money together in order to make an outcome, and that's what they want. But it can accomplish things you can't accomplish on your own." And the example he used for me was the Chicago Skyway, which was severely underpriced, and Mayor Daley sold it, and prices doubled. But you know what? Those roads are the best damn roads in Chicago because they invest in their assets.
Right.
Um, so that stuck with me. You know, I used to be very skeptical, and I'm not nearly so skeptical now. So that was one thing, and the other was I already got my plug in for the Medical Advertising Hall of Fame. If you're not if your agency isn't in the Medical Advertising Hall of Fame, what are you doing? Because it's an inexpensive way to train your staff, and we are creating an environment for the future. Likewise, if you're not in the Coalition for Healthcare Communications, then this stuff I just talked about with Senator Kennedy, you haven't heard much about. And there's a guy named Jim Potter who lets everybody know what's going on.
Right.
And he's a person well worth interfacing with. And the dues for the CHC are cheap in order to get that early warning system you need.
Right.
So I always put a plug in for both those organizations, because as past chairman of both of them, and my love for them is deep and real. So
Well, thank you, Jay. I'll
no,
let you go
thank
back.
you.
I'll let you go back to the lake.
You know what? It is lunch with the birthday girl now.
Ooh.
That's what it is. So
Well, give her a
it'll
treat
be
for
fun.
me.
I will do that. I will do. She's gonna get an extra treat. She's happy now.
Thank
All
you
right.
again, and we will see you when we see you.
It'll be soon, I'm sure. I'm not quite sure how soon, but it'll be soon.
All
Thanks
right.
a lot. Appreciate
Well.
you. My best to all your colleagues.
And mine to yours. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, buddy. Bye.